Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I have good news and bad news, but the bad news isn't that bad. The good news is that I mentioned a few weeks ago that I cry almost every morning thinking about losing my wife, Ange, and I take a selfie most days when I'm crying. I'm not sure why I do that or why I shared about it, but since I did 2 weeks ago or so, I've only cried a couple of times. While I'm not happy, I'm not as sad as I've been, and that's a win. But there's been a loss this week too. This time, it was my robot vacuum. There's no other way to describe what happened at my house other than to say that my robot vacuum committed suicide. I put my smart robot upstairs to clean Keaton's gaming area and room, and 20 minutes later, I hear a loud banging and breaking that went on for 20 stairs, and I'm like, holy shit, is someone breaking into my house? Because it was so loud. But no, the robot threw itself down the stairs in protest of cleaning my kids' filthy floors. Another loss, but there were no tears here. This one's only a thing, and I'm okay with that. I bought another robot vacuum, and this one mops and sucks. So that's pretty awesome, and hopefully I do a lot less housework. But as you listen to this intro, I'm getting on a plane home after the Shane McConkey event, the PMS, and I'm sure we had an incredible event. We raised a lot of money and celebrated in the name of Shane McConkey. But while Shane was a hero to me, and he always will be because he was such an athlete and such a funny person, Sherry has been so much more to me over the years, and I can't thank her enough for being there for me this year and every year, really. Sherry, thank you. Shane, thank you. Ange, thank you. And this week, I also want to thank my guest, a dude who has literally done a little of everything. A pro hockey player, a pro skier, a pro pilot, certified with every acronym available, a dad, a husband. He's a legendary Alaska pioneer, an entrepreneur, an all-around badass, a dude I'm going to see in Tahoe this week. But before we talk to Kevin Quinn about all things Points North and beyond, I want to thank you for listening each week. Without you, this show doesn't happen. I also want to ask you to share my social posts and tell a friend about the show. If you like this show, I have a feeling that your friends are going to like it as well. So please do that for me. Finally, please support my incredible sponsors who make this podcast happen. They are Elan Skis, Best Day Brewing, Outdoor Research, and Insta360 action cameras. Now, it's time to chat with Kevin Quinn. While we're not going to use this podcast to talk much about your life in aviation, most of the world knows you as a badass mountain man for the past 30 years, but there's a whole nother part of the world that knows you for flying. Are you more of a big deal in the world of flight or skiing?
It's funny. I laugh at it often. My kids give me a hard time all the time where we're going through an airport and somebody's like, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, are you a pilot or are you a skier? And I feel, I was never this. I've created the heli ski operation that made my life what it is, thankfully. And I've been flying since I was young. And the aviation world has taken me to where, I guess, people recognize me for my exploits in aviation, landing in various places, teaching flying and mentoring young pilots, etc. And then putting on this big event that we have in the desert called the High Sierra Fly-In. Several thousand people in the desert meeting us annually every October. We put on this big Burning Man style event. That's what we call the High Sierra Fly-In. And from there, we started drag racing our airplanes, which is what stole drag is. And that became now one of the racing classes at the Reno Air Races, which is now in Roswell, New Mexico. And so we're one of the 7 racing classes there. And I could go on and on about that if you wanted to hear more.
No, I don't.
I feel very lucky about being able to do both.
So is it one of those deals where in skiing you're more of an entrepreneur, but in flying you're almost like looked at as an athlete? Like there's that dude?
100. Yeah, I would say so. In my ski world, I was always a wannabe, right? Like
you had sponsors and you did a lot of stuff, but this people look at you as the guy.
Yeah, I think so. It's like, oh, he's the pilot, and he's landing in places that nobody really wants to land. And oh my goodness, he created this big event called the High Sierra Fly-In, and he's created the Stole Drag air racing, which is one of a kind in itself. And I say with my ski stuff, I was a skier, and I was part of 17 Warren Miller films, right? That's a big thing for us with our business. But by the most part, I was ski guide and, living in Tahoe, Squaw Valley, and having the friends and relationships that we did there. I certainly credit a lot of that to our success in Alaska. I was a ski bum, former professional hockey player, and heck, I even stopped playing hockey to chase the ski dreams as a wannabe skier.
Well, you can't spoil the whole story. We're going to talk, We're like in the intro a little bit, and I'm just going to tease you a little bit in the intro. And so we're going to talk about all of this. In thinking about aircraft and being in the mountains, what's riskier in your opinion? Like, where are the odds stacked against you more? In the mountains where there's more unpredictable things, or is it in the sky where there's more unpredictable things? I don't know.
It's all pretty relative, to be honest. I think there is both. I would say that being in the mountains, you've got a lot of the elements such as, especially when we're in the big mountains of Alaska and away from our ski resorts with the heavily glaciated terrain, the avalanches, the rockfall, the ice, the skiers themselves, are we going to have to play rescue? Then you get into the aviation aspect that mixes into that skiing with the helicopters and where we're landing helicopters. And, there are so many exploits that have gone on in my ski aviation life that's just, ski aviation away from the airplanes that I'm doing now in Alaska with the pilots that we have that were fantastic. And I'm not a helicopter pilot by any means. I've got a bunch of dual time. But by the most part, the helicopter aspect was the magic carpet. It was the magic carpet for me to ride on to access the mountains, right? Because I'm a skier first and foremost. But the hazards that go into that and the mitigation that goes into all of that is something that is definitely, there's a lot to be said for that. The other side of that coin, the aviation aspect, I think there's a lot that correlates to what we're doing in Alaska heli skiing, as does with our backcountry flying and our big tires being able to land everywhere. I always say if it looks smooth, it might be, but if it looks rough, it is. And so here we're pioneering and looking for places to land our aircraft. And I want to boldly go where no man has gone before, right? But to do it safely. And so similar to skiing, when we're flying up the face of a mountain in a helicopter and we're looking at an object to ski, mechanized ski guiding is top down. And we didn't have that time to walk up it and or skin, boot pack, whatever, to assess the snow and really take our time and analyze the situation. Where with a helicopter, you come into the valley, time is money, right? And so I always say a good ski guide needs to be able to look at it, identify the run itself, identify the safe zones, identify the hazards, and can I get down this with the people that I have in the back seat safely? And so you have one pass to look at it, you circle around, you might get a second pass. And if you have to look at it 3 times, 4 times, you're spending too much time and it's probably not the spot to go land today. And that's very similar to our backcountry flying. You're flying around, you look somewhere and think, I think I can land on that ridge line, or I can land on that little spire over there that looks like it's got 600 feet that's pretty smooth. I think I can get in there. And so it correlates back and forth with one another where it's very, very much the same. The risk assessment, the analysis. Can I land there? Well, can I take off? What are my hazards? And man, I get off on it. I love that feeling of exploration, but the big side of that is the safety aspect. Can I do it safely? And now I'm at the point where I've been teaching people to do this for a really long time. And my whole goal is to get people out of their comfort zone, but to get them out of their comfort zone safely and make them feel like, I know that I can do this and do it safely. And they come back, oh my God, that was the best day or best thing I've ever done in my life. And they go and they get that experience and they can continue pursuing their own goals. But they've got this foundation and this base of, being able to do things safely. And you're never going to teach everybody everything, but if you can give them a good foundational base, so to speak, that's the big one.
All right. Well, we were talking about risk and we kind of gotten in a roundabout way. This interview is going to go with a lot of Kevin talking because I don't know you that well, but you can spin a yarn, I think, and you're pretty passionate about everything that we're saying. So I'm going to have to be calculated in my questions that I ask you. And me knowing risk in being in the ski industry for 20 some odd years, I've probably known 30 people to pass, unfortunately, in the mountains and outside of the mountains. How about yourself? Are you probably triple that?
Just too many. It's not something that I really want to keep track of. But, when we're in this environment, aviation, backcountry flying, backcountry skiing, all of the above. Yeah, there's been a lot. I mean, I remember the days before we even had our heli ski operation here in Tahoe. There was a lot of mishaps and people passing. And then all of a sudden, I dreaded going to Alaska because for whatever reason, March was a bad month for Tahoe, Squaw Valley in particular. And we could rattle the names that we lost every single year. In my hangar, I've got all these names written on the side of an old refrigerator that we keep, red, white, and blue soda pops in.
I lost you.
To answer you, yeah, you can give me a microphone and I can talk all day, so don't feel bad about cutting me off.
No, well, one of the people that we lost, unfortunately, was Shane McConkey. I don't know if you lived in a house with Shane, but you were probably in one of those houses with all those dudes back at that time when everything was popping off in Tahoe. Were you there at that time?
Yes, definitely. We were all part of that. And so I was a couch surfer in a house up on Tiger Tail. And I can't even say that I was a roommate there. I was living with Jeff McKittrick at the time in Alpine, who was also back in the day the guy. He had the last chair on KT, famous picture of him carrying a big cross. And Jeff was just Jeff. Anybody who knows Kidder, I mean, the ski world knows McKittrick.
Yep.
To this day, Kidder and Kreitler are the only two that I've ever seen bake 6 or less turns down the face of Sphinx, which is mind-boggling. And there's a famous photo that sits in the lodge of both Kidder and Kreitler doing such. But I was friends with Shane, but I wasn't close to Shane. Pre-Shane was Gambler, who we were all pretty close with, Frank Gambali. And when Gambler died, we all basically went and learned how to skydive, and one thing led to the next there. Right? But
so you were doing all that with all those dudes, like the bungee jumping and the skydiving?
Oh yeah. We bungee. I mean, I can talk about it now, but Jimbo Fritsch, who was,
Your long guide, right?
He today is our longest tenured guide in Alaska. He was one of my very first clients, close friend, season 1. Season 2, he became a guide, and he was a guide to this day. He's still there. He's now our longest running guide in Alaska at 27, 28 years strong. And there's nobody like Jimbo. Jimbo is running the bungee tower. And back in those days, it was Primal Instinct Bungee and Vertigo Bungee. And I had a relationship with Vertigo and that crew. And then I had a relationship with the Primal Boys because there was a fellow when I came home from playing hockey named MC. And MC was one of those that passed in March in Squaw on a tree well. Who I remember speaking at his funeral about, where did this no friends on a powder day come from? And MC went up and over and tumbled into a tree well. And, everybody kept skiing and his body was found later in the day. But MC introduced me to the Primal crew. When I came home, I was like, I think I'm going to be a door guy. And somebody said, you got to meet this fella MC. I'm like, who the hell's MC? And MC and I became the best of best friends. He was one of my very best friends of life. And with MC, I ended up meeting Jimbo and Miles, and that was the Primal Instinct crew. Well, Jimbo was also running the bungee tower at Squaw, and Primal and Vertigo had this back and forth, like, we're Primal, we're Vertigo. And I had this relationship with Vertigo. I was living in Washington for a short time playing hockey, and I had Vertigo come up. We were jumping off bridges there. But when our connections all merged, saving long story short, I think our claim to fame in particular, a night that I can always remember, we bungee jumped the Golden Gate Bridge the night they were retiring Joe Montana's jersey. And I remember going past the security tower and we had black face paint and our black fatigues. And we went from the Sausalito side. And you remember Dan Osmond, the late Dan Osmond, we were part of that whole thing down in the park. And one thing leads to the next. Dan was walking across the lattice on his feet and we're all up there terrified, shimmying across the lattice, at 8, 9 o'clock in the pitch black on the Golden Gate. And we sat down there jumping the Golden Gate Bridge that night, while they retired Joe Montana's jersey. That's something that we'll always look back on as a highlight for the bungee days.
When you think about all the different laws that you were breaking back then to just have fun, did you ever get caught for anything? Because I know, like, Frank, I think, ends up dying because people were chasing him and he got caught in a river or whatever.
Yeah, Frank jumped, what was it, El Cap, and Rangers were up to him. He got chased by the Rangers. He went into the river, and, we lost Frank in the river. But thankfully, we never really got caught or busted doing any of that kind of stuff. We were always really pretty calculated, not that Frank wasn't. But I can say, there were times when we were down in Orville jumping the bridge down there and doing our thing where you have lookouts on both ends and you run into the bushes and hide. And, I mean, you do stupid things when you're young, right? It's like you're young and dumb and just full of yourself, but we're out trying to have as much fun as we possibly can. And I mean, why are we breaking the law, jumping off a railroad bridge? Are you kidding me? We're having fun out here. Everything fun should be illegal, right?
With that kind of crew where there's just like a lot of energy and a lot of dumb shit going on, there's a lot of athletic stuff as well. But outside of that, I would think in the bars, everywhere these guys are sending it, because that's just kind of how they go, is one speed. You're part of that whole crew. But you're the dude who's like 6'4" and a monster. I don't know how tall and big you are, but you're a pretty big dude. You're known for fighting in hockey. And when shit ever got out of control, did you ever have to like clean stuff up for the crew?
Not with that crew in particular, but my late good buddy Greg Harms, who the ski world knows. Greg and I lived together in South Lake. Now backing up, even moving to North Shore and meeting the crew we just talked about, Harms and I started our ski life. I have an interesting tale with my hockey and ski life. I grew up playing hockey. Of course, I played baseball and football, and I was a ski racer, sort of, but not really. Not like my daughter and not like these kids nowadays that we're taking care of.
And this is all in Alaska?
This is all in Alaska, yeah. And then my folks had some issues. Mom moved away. Dad, they stayed together forever. They never got a divorce, and I thought they would. But long story short, I was playing really serious hockey. Then I stopped playing hockey for a few years.
Yeah, why is that, though? Because you were really good, and usually kids at that age, they get into these leagues and start traveling and leave their families, and they go all in on hockey. Why would you just move to Squaw?
So, again, I was playing hockey at the highest level at a young age, and I was the captain. I was one of the better players. And holy mackerel, here we go. I have this hockey career. Well, life came full circle. My folks aren't really getting along. Life is there. I also had this ski life. Mom moved to Lake Tahoe to get away from Pops. And at that time I was playing hockey. I thought, man, I'm never going to get further than this. It's just kind of, I've reached my cap. But I had this idea in my brain of like skiing as well, and growing up around hunting and fishing lodges in Alaska and the aviation side. I thought, man, my mom's in Tahoe and I'm tired of just sort of riding the bus leagues and juniors. And what's this going to get me, right? You're young, you don't know any better. And so I stopped playing hockey for a little while, and I went to Tahoe and spent a whole lot of time in South Lake. I went through all of the PSIA ranks.
So that's interesting too. No kids that are young like you want to be a ski instructor and go through PSIA classes, I would think.
No. And back then it was, I want to do something, I didn't want to, I knew that I did a bunch of jobs. I was a mover. I was a carpet layer. I dug ditches, building for foundations. I did a lot of that stuff and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And long story short, Greg was into the ski school and I got hired with Robin Barnes and Mike Rogan and myself and Mike Lyons, who ran PSA for a long time. We went through the ranks under the tutelage of Stu Campbell, who wrote the American teaching method.
Like a legend.
He's a legend. He was our ski school director. And I went through, and he was big on education. John Darby, Jimmy Ackerson came through, and they were our next ski school directors. They were big on education, and that was the thing. And so I went through and got my full certification with PSIA, basically as high as you could go without becoming an examiner, and I still keep that current to this day. And at the same time, I was coaching the ski team down there, working with the Heavenly Ski Foundation. And I remember getting fired from Heavenly because they wouldn't let us ski down the face in our ski instructor coats. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to take my jacket off to ski to the bottom. And so I'd always sneak down. I'd always get in trouble for skiing the face over the gun barrel, which is the main face and heavily in my jacket. So I got fired. I'm like, now what am I going to do? I'm not a ski instructor anymore.
Hey, did your buddies clown you for being a ski instructor when they're all like the gnarly dudes?
Not back then, because I didn't know any of those. Back then, it was Glenn Plake, who
he loves PSIA.
With Plake and Darren Johnson and Robbie Tavares. I mean, those guys were all Cameron Boyle. They were the face rats of Heavenly, and those became our buddies. And I'm living with Greg Harms, and here I'm like, oh, I'm going to go back and play hockey. The only way to get into this is fighting. And because now I've lost my job as a ski instructor. So that took me back to hockey now. Now I'm 3.5, 4 years removed hockey, thinking, how in the hell am I ever going to make it? And so I went packed my stuff up. I went east, and I remember going to a bunch of different tryouts, and I wasn't the kid that was the best kid anymore. I was a big guy, and I'm playing low-level professional hockey, and the only way I was going to make it, and being an adrenaline junkie, the only way I was going to make it was I'm fighting. I'm not afraid of anyone. I'm not the toughest guy, but hell, I'll go throw down with someone. This is going to be awesome. And next thing you know, I find myself fighting all the time. And of course, that had its own, it starts to wear on you, right? My teeth are fake. My nose is crooked. My hockey card has 2 black eyes. My nose is sideways, and I've got stitches above and below my eyes.
You got a hockey card, though. That's cool.
Oh, yeah, you can Google Kevin Quinn's hockey card. Is probably, if you buy it, I probably owe you $5. And so that was kind of my hockey career was what you would consider AA, AAA hockey. And when I was sort of finding my way through that, going, I was searching through life, like just going my day by day as to what am I going to be when I grow up. And I found myself back in Tahoe. It's where Mom was. And there was a hockey team to finish my career called the Reno Renegades. We called them the Reno Rejects. And we were down there playing in front of 4,000 or 5,000 people here in Reno, but I was living in Tahoe. So holy mackerel, I got the best of both worlds here.
It's time for my first sponsor break. And I'm going to start with longtime sponsor Elan Skis. And if you haven't skied on an award-winning ripstick yet, you're missing out on something that ski brands have long said wasn't an option. A lightweight ski that powers through anything and truly rips. It's game-changing. And Elan, while they've been around for 80 years, have been changing the game of modern skiing by doing things like adding side cut to straight skis with the Elan SCX, which changed the whole industry. They're building skis by skiers in a place with ski culture in the Slovenian Alps. And most importantly, they're supporting local shops. When the competition goes and starts selling direct, Elan sticks by their retailers who have been by them since the beginning. Elan is just built differently, and they innovate with a purpose, and that's to make your on-snow experience better, easier, and more fun. It's this approach that brought you the Ripstick and all of their award-winning skis. And when you're in the market for a new pair, visit an Elan retailer, demo a pair of their skis, and you'll know why Elan has built a cult following here in the States. To find out more about all the skis or to find an Elan dealer, head on over to elanskis.com. Next up, it's Insta360 action cameras, the only 360 camera that matters these days. These are the best action cameras on the market. They capture everything around you in 8K 360-degree video. It's next to impossible to miss the shot, and your footage won't be shaky thanks to the super smooth stabilization system, which is so important when you're on the mountain. Insta360 developed their X5 and X4 Air cameras with skiers and snowboarders in mind, which means they feature a freeze-proof design, batteries with longer run times, and a super durable design that will have you getting footage from the park to powder. And when it comes to editing that footage, Insta360's proprietary editing program makes it easier than ever to create Hollywood-level content or just a simple edit for you and your friends to enjoy. It's easy. Insta360 is the best action camera on the market, and for listening to the Powell Movement, they're going to give you a special offer. When you head on over to Insta360.com, they're holding a ski bundle sale for their flagship 360-degree action cameras, including the X5 and X4 Air cameras. When you're at checkout after you make your purchase, enter the code POWELL, that's capital P-O-W-E-L-L, and you're going to get a free ski pole mount from the good folks at Insta360 Cameras. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. When your mom watches you play hockey and your job is just to beat the shit out of people, what's your mom's reaction?
Oh my God, she's the one in the fan standing up spilling beer all over everybody.
Like, kick his ass, Kevin! Like that?
She's my mother, yeah. I mean, she's crazy, I love her to death, and she's definitely a proud supporter, and she was the one in the stands. You'd hear her the loudest, the cowbell going and the whole works.
Okay.
I mean, she embarrasses my son now because she shows up at his football games, and she's the one in the stands with that same cowbell ringing it, and come on, Cash. And, it's pretty fun, I think she was a concerned mom, but she was, big, proud supporter too.
So hockey ends for you, and then you head back up to Tahoe, probably with not a big plan, but it's time to figure something out?
Yep. So enter that whole life that I started back a little bit ago. I'm home from hockey. What am I going to do? I'm done playing hockey. I'll be a door guy, and I'm going to meet this fella MC, which then turned into meeting everybody else. At this time, I've left South Shore because my mom's on South Shore. I'm like, I want to be on North Shore. I want to go to Squaw Valley. That's where Scott Schmidt is. That's where Kevin Andrews is. That's where everybody that's anybody, those guys are over there. And at this point, Glenn has kind of gone on to do his own thing, and Darren is getting older, and Cameron Boyle's sort of gone, and it's this changing of the season, so to speak, changing of the guard. I want to go to North Shore, Squaw Valley. Squaw Valley is where it's happening. We're all watching these pictures and movies. That's where Glenn was going, That's where I teased Tom Day, who I think is probably the best skier on the mountain. I mean, Tom Day's been longtime cinematographer for Warren Miller forever, but pre that he was Hatchets and TGR was Standard and whatnot. And Tom, he's that guy. And so I remember those ski segments, Scott Schmidt's going to Chamonix and he's looking for a ski partner. Enter Mike Hattrup. Oh, Tom Day takes the easy way out. And I give him a hard time all the time because he's sending, I think it's mainline. And Tom skis out, but Warren's like, and Tom Day takes the easy way out. So I've never let Tom live that down. It's just for fun. And then the next shot is Glenn with his huge cameras all over his head and the blonde hair hanging out. And it's enter Mr. Glenn Blake. And he airmails everything over the above of everybody else. And after that segment, Scott Schmidt found a ski partner. And Glenn Blake and Scott Schmidt were off to Chamonix. And their next opening segment's them rapping into the Bridge Coar. And, it's the famous Greg Stump film. And I want to go to Squaw Valley. So here I'm in Squaw Valley doing my thing and trying to be a skier. And I get invited on a trip to Alaska with the Deloriers.
Before that, you were getting sponsored. You got skis from Elan and stuff too, right?
Oh, yeah. My good buddy Dave Nagel says, I'd rather be bowling than skiing on Elan.
But you're getting free skis from somebody.
Back in the day, you were sponsored. Oh, my God, I got some goggles and free pair of goggles. How cool is that? Oh, I got a pair of sunglasses. Well, that's really cool. Oh, I got a free pair of skis. Man, I'm rich. This is fantastic. I don't have to buy skis. And so, yeah, I got sponsored by Olin, and I have a couple pairs of Smith goggles and glasses. And Ultra Nectar was like the clothing. And I got a jacket and a pair of pants, probably because I knew the rep. And long story short, boy, I felt sponsored. And that sort of worked into, all right, we're going to Alaska. And I was on a heli ski trip, one of my first heli ski trips. This is now 2 years before P&H. Dean Cummings had just opened up H2O. And I was invited to go up with Straight Up Films with Rob and Eric Delorier. And it was myself, Jason Mack, Jen Berg, famous Dave Nagel, who has the famous photo of Jeff Holden for that famous cover shot that was taken at P&H our first year. And things just started evolving. And boy, Cummings and I butted heads that very first trip. He kept calling me hot dog. And man, I didn't like it. I wanted to murder him. And that it sort of set the seed for what was going to transpire, down the road with he and I. And all the heli wars that everybody read about. And I don't even really want to talk about that.
No, we're not going to talk about that. I said that I wouldn't, and you brought it up, and I enjoyed your choices of words there, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I wish Dean I wish him well, and I hope that things are good in his life nowadays, But long story short, that was my intro. I had one heli ski trip prior to that, and I was in Juneau with Todd Johnson, who was part of the TGR crew. And I worked at a Schwinn bicycle shop when I was 14 years old with Dirk Collins. And Dirk and I raced BMX bikes when we were like 13, 14, 15 years old in Alaska. And later to come in full circle, now he's one of the founders of TGR with the Joneses. I met this fellow, Todd Johnson, in Juneau, and we're starting this thing called Teton Gravity Research. And I got a hat. And wow, those guys are pretty cool. They sound like guys right up our alley. And one thing leads to the next because the Jackson boys were doing what all the Squaw family was doing. And it just kind of evolved. And after that trip with Dean, I got on a bush plane and said, man, I'm going to fly down to Cordova. I had so much experience around hunting and fishing lodges and that aviation stuff in Alaska. I thought, man, I think I could start my own heli ski operation.
I mean, you see what Dean did, and you're like, well, I could do that because there's definitely a market for this, and I can do my own, and I'm just going to do it over here.
Yeah, and we were the fourth heli ski operation in Alaska. Nowadays, I think there's been, at last count, I think there's 23 operations that have come and or gone. Half of those, came and left and or changed names. And really the only operations that are still really going would be Sean Dogg's down in Haines, Alaska Heli Skiing is one of the original. Valdez Heli Ski Guides, who do a phenomenal job. They were one of the very first. That's really it. And then P&H, which would be the next third longest running operation in Alaska right now. And so Valdez Heli Ski Guides has changed hands. They changed hands from Coombs to the Frasers. Sean Dog is still, I think Sean Dog's the longest running operator since inception. CPG is a year older than P&H. They were the third real operation. P&H was fourth, and we've changed hands now, 5 years ago to the new owners. But
are you still an owner? Because I saw that investors bought in, but I didn't know that you weren't an owner anymore.
We sold. Pre-COVID, we sold to one of our longtime guides and longtime clients.
Okay.
And I got wind. This is now, we're 23 years in, I guess that was, 22, 23 years into P&H. And it was making, I always had this slogan, adventures beyond dreams, but and dreams become reality, so to speak. P&H was a dream maker for myself, for my family, for thousands of people that came to visit us. And it's tattooed on my back like the size of a basketball. It's my tramp stamp. And people often said, well, are you committed, especially in the early years? How committed are you when I was looking for money to help support this cause?
Well, you have to raise, just thinking about that, how committed are you? How much do you have to raise in year one? Like $500,000?
Only in America can you start a heli ski operation with no money and owe everybody in the world at the end.
Oh, so you just started with stress. Like you're just like, I am going to make this as stressful as possible on myself.
Mike, I had no idea about business. I had no idea. I signed helicopter contracts that I had no idea what I was signing. The industry was sort of after us, learning that we were starting a heli ski operation. I took full-page magazine ads out in Powder and Ski and Skiing and Nat Geo. No one had ever done that. And everybody charged vertical. I had this idea, I'm going to charge heli time, which is now today the standard. Long story short, I owed so much money at the end of that first season. I thought to myself, how am I ever going to make this work? And I had two small investors, Lel Tone, who was one of our original guides. She was a patroller here at Squaw, who's now probably one of the baddest women in Alaska. There's a handful of women ski guides, and Lel is one of the original. Lel and Kirsten Kramer are the two that I look to as like the two original badass women ski guides. And you could throw Emily Coombs in there. I mean, she did what she did, but Lel and Kramer have taken women heli ski guiding in Alaska to that next level. They're as good or better than any guy ever dreams of being up there. But Lel was one of my original investors, as was Glenn Polson, who's one of the sons of the founders of Squaw Valley. And I can't remember exactly, but I think I borrowed 25 or 50 from Lel and 25 or 50 grand from Polson. And so, great, I'm off to the races with 100 grand to start a heli ski operation, but I owed so much money at the end of the season to my helicopter company. Man, I owed tons to the ski magazines, not to mention all of the other things that go into it with insurance and everything else. And it took a long time to overcome that. And I came up with some crazy ideas that panned out to make money and make it work.
Yeah, you had that Gold Pass program that worked out for you, but really it seems like what made the difference in the whole organization was your girlfriend who becomes your wife and her credit card in the beginning. But it's like you're this passion guy who's a doer, who's going to have your fingers in every possible thing you can. And in the beginning, having your fingers in the business part probably wasn't the best idea, because you're not looking at a seat as like, we have to look at every cost that we have, divide it by how many seats and how many days, and this is what a seat costs. You're not doing that. You're just like, dude, we got to get these guys here because it's so fucking awesome.
That's exactly it. I would go into a place and at this point I'm growing my hair out, and I'd go into a meeting with shorts and sandals and a t-shirt, and people are like, what's this long hair kid going to try to sell me? And I'd walk out of there with money, obviously, but I'm in debt to my wife because I remember coming to Tahoe after my first season. I see this blonde ponytail go down the mountain. And of course, here I go chasing the wind, so to speak. And again, I feel so lucky with the things that happened. But Jessica went to school for hotel hospitality and business management. And I told her, you got to come to Alaska for me this summer. And, there's an extra room you can stay in and you can make a whole lot of money at the bar because all the fishermen in town, you're going to crush it there, and I promise you'll have your own room. And she came to Alaska and realized that she didn't have her own room. And yeah, she made a lot of money, but ultimately her good credit, her business sense, it was a perfect yin and yang. It really was. I was the visionary and she was the skeptic, and that skeptic really kept me on the straight and narrow. And, the first things that got paid off were those credit cards so that we could continue with good credit, because I never wanted to hurt her with that damage. My helicopter provider too, because I never got that same helicopter provider back because it took me 5+ years to pay him off. But the second helicopter provider, North Star Trekking, came in, Mr. Bob Engelbrecht, and longtime pilot Jason Colbeth, who's up there still to this day. Bob looked at me as a father figure. It was a father figure to me, and he just said, son, this is the deal. You're going to pay me first, and if you don't pay me on Friday, the helicopter's going to leave. And so I had 2 payments that I had to make, and it just started to evolve. And with that, the Gold Pass, my corporate attorney looked at me and he said, son, I think you're crazy. But I said, I got this idea and I think I can sell a pass for people to come heli skiing. And he's like, I don't know if I can write that up for you. I said, you got to. I said, I think I can make this work, because I think that if they buy into this pass, but you limit them on how many people can be in one aircraft at a given time, how many pass holders, I should say, can be on that aircraft. I can put them with anybody in house. And so I can put them with the best in the house or the least experienced in the house. Well, these guys all of a sudden become marketers. Well, hey, I got this gold pass in Alaska and I sold passes for $25,000 and $50,000. I generated almost $500,000 in about 3 weeks just on these passes. All of a sudden, holy mackerel, there's an opportunity now where I'm paying off debt. I'm setting myself up for the next season. I'm able to market. And again, it all sort of worked out to where these pass holders, like I say, became marketers. They went all over the planet. Some of them were the best of the best snowboarders in the world. Some were like Olympic gold medalist Seth Westcott. Some were like the famous monomaniac Lee Doobie, who's probably the best monoboarder in the world. Some were blue-collared folks that heard about this, that, got together, rubbed 2 nickels and thought, man, this is a really good opportunity, because I was basically giving heli skiing away for 75% off. And they just, like I say, I'm a broken record, but they became marketers for the business.
They're bringing people out with them, right? They're like, hey, we've got this place and you're going to go. It's going to be so awesome. And that's the only place they're going because they got a pass.
And the caveat was, yes, they have a pass. And I don't want to get stuck with a group that Quinner puts me in, because I want to take my friends to be able to go ski wherever I want to ski. And it just unfolded. I would never call myself genius, but I look back at that and that was a genius play in our Points North playbook. Without those passes, I probably wouldn't have had Points North as long as we did, because Jessica's credit could only take us so far. But I needed to come up with a lot of money and a lot of money fast. And I mean, a really good story for those first couple of years. My dishwasher at the time was a 9-10-year-old boy who's now mid-30s, pushing 40. His mom was my bank lady, Cully Thompson. Well, Wesley, he's been so part of Points North since he was a little boy. I've watched him grow up from dishwasher to running tour camp with Dosty and Brennan Lagasse that are out there in our tour camp. And Wesley's part of that. Now he's he was fueler. Now he's one of our ski guides there. But Wesley's mom was the banker at First National. And what I learned was that she taught me to this. She says a creditor can only levy your account once a day. And I had like 4 or 5 creditors that were coming after me with judgments and levying my account. I never bankrupt any of those. I threatened them with bankruptcy, but I didn't believe in it, because I bought the service. I needed to pay for the service. And I thought to myself, man, if I bankrupt these folks, it's a black eye on me as an individual, but it's also a black eye on this business that I'm wanting to create so we can keep doing this. And so there's that old adage for anybody that's ever listened: if you owe somebody money, just give them $1. Like, it shows good faith. Well, it got to the point where people got tired of getting $1. They all wanted their chunks, right? And my two big creditors were, I owed Powder Magazine, which was EMAP at the time, a ton of money, like a couple $100,000 with fees and court fees and everything compounding.
Do you have like Ashley calling you all pissed off, or one of those dudes?
It wasn't Ashley. It was their lawyers and creditors.
Okay.
You know, I'm still buddies with Kevin Back and all those guys who actually ended up coming and becoming clients of ours. And I owed the lawyers and the attorneys all this money. And the one company in particular for coastal helicopters, that attorney got so bad that he was levying my account every day. Well, Cully, Wesley's mom, said, Kevin, just come to the bank at 8:50 every morning. We'll withdraw every penny you have. I'll give you a cashier's check. When the levy comes in, I'll let you know. I bring back the cashier's check. She cashes it. This played out every single day. And the creditors finally realized they weren't going to get a dime, because I told them, look, you got to stop. I'm either going to bankrupt you and you're never going to get a dime, or you got to trust the fact that I'm going to make this work and I'm going to pay it off. Here's another $5. I promise you I'm going to pay you. And so I was able to get out from underneath that once the invention of the gold passes came at about end of season 3, start of season 4, when we generated all this income to be able to really make heavy payments to these creditors and buy some more time. And I think it was about season 8 or 9 that we officially became debt free and really started, wow, this is actually working, you know, and then it's just turned into the American dream, where 20 some years later, we have a longtime client and a longtime guide. I hear of them shopping for a heli ski operation. I got wind that they were looking at possibly buying Jackson Hole Heli, maybe a Canadian operation. I said, Paul, you guys, Jerry, what do you think? And they're like, Quinner, you would never sell. I'm like, everything's for sale. At this point, I got kids that Kinley's turning into this high-level ski racer, and it's affecting her because we're pulling her in and out of school, which is great for her as a young kid because she's learning diversification with both places, but it was starting to affect her. And it just worked out that, you know, they came back and offered a great opportunity for me to set my family up, which is what it's all about, right? And, you know, there's times where I went through a really dark, and I still go in and out of it every now and then, because Points North was my baby. It's everything that I've ever done in my life. That it's me. Like I say, it's tattooed on my back the size of a basketball. And the friends, the relationships, everybody knew me as that guy that created Points North up in Alaska, and all the people that we got to entertain and the friendships that were created around the world. I'm so grateful for what it did. And, you know, I feel so lucky. You know, I praise the good Lord every single day with how lucky I am, and to be in the position I'm in and what it created for me. I'm very, very lucky.
Well, what I took out of that is that you money laundered and then you hired a 10-year-old to work for you. But other than that, I took a lot more out of that as well. It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start out with Outdoor Research. I could spend a lot of this ad telling you all the tech and why Outdoor Research is better, but know that in the 1980s and the early 90s, Outdoor Research built a reputation on functional quality outdoor gear that pushed the limits of innovative possibilities. And those who were function first were all about OR gear, because it was and it still is built better, and Outdoor Research is still pushing those limits of innovation. This year, the outerwear focuses on 3 new collections: the Cloud Chaser for backcountry and the Powderverse and Hemisphere collections for freeride, as well as some staples in the line like the Snow Crew collection. These outerwear systems are styled for and by athletes like Mark Adma, Troy Podnelsack, Zoe Aitken, snowboarder Neil Provo, and others, and that's why this outerwear collection not only looks so good, but each piece is more functional than ever, and they're all you're going to need in any conditions. To find out more about the new collection, head on over to OutdoorResearch.com. My final sponsor this round is B.A.S.E Brewing, and now is the time to think snow. And skiers, snowboarders, weekend warriors, tubers, sledders, snowbikers, snowmobilers, snowshoers, sled doggers, shovel racers, snow angel makers, ice skaters, snowball fighters, igloo builders, you get it. The doers of winter are starting to get ready to shred, and post-shred, it's all about après. And this year, do après the right way. Forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, forget about not taking more runs on the mountain, forget about getting in trouble on the way home, because with a beer from B.A.S.E Brewing, you don't have to worry about any negative consequences, just incredible flavor. Blind taste tests prove that you won't be able to taste the difference between a B.A.S.E and your favorite beer with alcohol. The only difference you'll notice is how good you'll feel in the morning, and you're going to remember what you did last night, which is almost refreshing as a B.A.S.E itself. To celebrate your best day yet, next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of B.A.S.E. Or you can always buy it on your Alaska Airlines flight, Amazon.com, or head on over to BestDayBrewing.com to get the full assortment of B.A.S.E.s. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. So you're able to turn everything around after 9 years, then it becomes the American dream. But in just thinking about the business itself, you're in a business where you're the head honcho and the face of the brand, and you bring all these people in. You have a limited amount of days that people can actually go ski with you, but you don't know if those days are actually going to actually work. So people in the beginning of the year pay you a bunch of money, and if they're going for a week, they're probably spending, 10, 12 grand a piece?
Back then, they were spending more like probably $3 or $4 grand because you could buy helicopter time for $4.25 an hour. And, when we all started going to Alaska, it was helicopter chips for $25 for a run that you could get up and dropped off and ski back to the road. Well, when we started, our very first helicopter hours, I want to say were $3.85 an hour. And we were paying for heli time, not vertical. And yeah, you as the face, I've been always a big believer that you can baffle them with BS, but don't do that. You got to be a straight shooter. You got to be honest. And at the end of the day, all you have is your word. And people will learn to love you or hate you if you're honest with them. They might not like what you have to say, but gosh darn it, this is how it is. It's black and white. There is no in between, because I always say the gray area kills people. And you have to be black and white. You have to be transparent, be honest. And at the end of the day, you're only as good as your word. And that goes back to even, where the laundering, I was laundering money back into that business every single day. It wasn't like I was taking and running and spending it somewhere else. It was doing everything I could do so that my creditors wouldn't take it all in one lump sum, but it still allowed me to operate.
Well, the whole thing with you is respect, too. It's like you talked about all those different heli companies changing their names over the years. And they've changed their names because they went bankrupt, because they weren't able to do what you did. But you didn't have to do that once, where probably there were nights where you didn't sleep, probably where you almost had tears of like, how am I going to make this happen? But you never had to ruin your name.
Mike, I still have PTSD from it. I mean, I literally, Alaska heli skiing, aside from the financial side and all this money that I owed people, you also had people coming to visit you. And I remember in the early days when the people went to bed, it was, hey, Quinner, the buildings are running out of fuel, but we only have enough fuel to run the helicopter tomorrow, but the fuel dock opens at 6 a.m. How do you want to jockey this? I'm like, well, we need heli fuel to get them going, but we'll get fuel to come out here, when it opens. So why don't you take 50 gallons out of the building, run it out to the fuel truck so we got fuel for the helicopter to get people out of here. I'm not quite sure how we're going to get them home. The fuel truck can come and we can get the buildings and maintain cold buildings for half the day. It's became a jockey, It was, Quinner, we're out of lettuce and we need more toilet paper. I'm like, we got to figure this out. Take all the toilet paper out of the guide's house. They got T-shirts. I mean, it was that real. It was that real for a little while. And, again, you come back to the party with a straight face and you're smiling like it's the best day ever. And you don't ever want anybody to know the reality behind the scenes because, man, you don't want to let on that you're struggling at the ultimate end where, literally – you don't know if you're going to be able to operate tomorrow because the helicopters are going to fly home or we're not going to be able to put gas in them.
That's just a crazy existence where you're the guy for every question. Anything that goes wrong goes straight to you, which has got to be nuts. But when you think of the biggest mistakes that you made early on, what's that biggest mistake?
The biggest mistake, first and foremost, was signing a helicopter contract that I had no idea signing because I didn't have the experience. That was a big, big mistake. Outside of that, I don't really look back at any other real mistakes that stick out like a thorn, so to speak, for Points North. I mean, there was probably a few hiccups here and there, but, we got really lucky. We got really, really lucky. And I think that the biggest hurdle for me was getting over that first season's debt. And, anything that is successful these days, you have to take the risk. I challenge people that so many people are stuck in their day-to-day routine, their day-to-day rut, and then they get family and they all of a sudden have kids, and now they're stuck in this day-to-day. And a lot of people, I mean, we're lucky, mountain folk, beach folk, we're very similar. We're all very like-minded. We enjoy life. We get outside. We enjoy what we're doing. And money really isn't the caveat. But the other part of the world, once you get out of the beach mountain bubble, it's reality. And those people that live what I call in that concrete jungle, a lot of those people live day to day and they're stuck in this rut, but they have big dreams and aspirations, but they're afraid to do it. And I encourage anybody that's out there that feels like they're stuck in a rut and has a big dream, the only way you're ever going to be able to make that dream come true is to step outside that box and go for it. You just have to go for it. And I'm a big believer in manifestation. I manifested so many things on this is how it's going to work. And to this day, I teach my kids, if you want something manifested, it will work. It will happen. You become that person.
But you're all passion-based, like all the things that you're passionate about, and then you're like 150% in and you're going to do more than everybody else. And it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you have that passion, it's over.
100%. And again, my dad used to always say, if you're going to do something the first time, do it right and give 110%. And I try to give my kids that. Like, it might not be the best decision, but if you're going to do it, be the best. If you're going to scrub toilets, be the best at it. If you're going to wash cars, be the best at it. If you're going to be a realtor, be the best, et cetera, et cetera. If you're going to pound nails, be the best damn nail pounder that there's out there. If you're going to be a heli ski operator, be the best one you can be. If I'm going to coach football like I'm doing and coaching baseball and coaching these kids skiing, I'm going to be the very, very best that I can be at it. And what are those steps to get me there? Well, I got to do continuing education. I need to go to coaches clinics. I need to read. I need to absorb. Jessica gets on me all the time. She says, "Will you get off that damn phone?" I'm like, well, I'm watching this video and I'm actually learning a teaching concept of what somebody's teaching some other athlete. And man, I want to be able to take that to my team. And so, if you're going to do something, what's the point of doing it half-assed? You got to go all in. I go head first and figure out how to piece it together afterwards.
All right. Well, in the world that you're in, it's not all good, obviously. And in terms of there's accidents, people die. And unfortunately, I think you had someone die like your 4th year in or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had one fatality. And I say to this day, the only way that we would have not had that happen was to not ski. We were using a pickup on a glacier that we have used time and time again, over and over. And a gentleman fell through, the ice broke out from underneath the group's feet. And he was the one that went. He went a couple 100 feet into the ice. And yep.
Just it wasn't his day. And that totally sucks. But when that happens, and I would think when you're selling heli skiing in the beginning and there's 4 or 5 other different outfits, I mean, do people not want to go to Points North because they're like, that's the one where they lost someone last year?
Our biggest factor, I think, that with anybody in Alaska, which is why I became so heavily involved in Heli Ski US, United States Heli Ski Association, was the mentorship with people that have been doing it forever. The Joe Royers of the world, who's now 45 years into business in the Rubies, the Wasatch Powderbird boys, Mike Olson, all those guys, they were mentors to what I was doing. But long story short, when that happens, you surround yourself with experience. And by all means, again, I've always been really big on making sure that your documentation is up to snuff, making sure your training is up to snuff, making sure all of your I's and T's are dotted and crossed, because no one's perfect. And that day in particular was a day that we could be walking down the street and lightning strikes, right? And you get hit by it. It was a horrible, horrible day in Points North's life. We told the world exactly what happened. We put it out there. And thankfully, the people that have been coming to visit us understood how we were. They trusted us. They knew our reputation. They knew our protocols for safety, the training aspect. And, without saying any stronger, I ran a really tight ship
with that kind of stuff. And it showed. And the group that was there with him, I believe they were in a big group. And the group knew that we were a class act and we weren't out there just playing cowboys and Indians. And I refer to heli skiing often as cowboys and Indians. You know, oftentimes you get in that helicopter and it's just snowed. You know, when we heli ski, we don't wait for snow to settle. You get a blue sky day, the weather just dumped 6 feet of snow and we've been sitting for the last week. Holy mackerel, it went blue. And an hour later, we're in the mountains. There's no settlement. And some of those days, the Indians are out there banging their drum and sharpening their sword, so to speak, you know, sharpening their arrows, waiting for the cowboys to come around the corner. And other days you go out and man, oh man, we're the cowboys blazing saddle, firing our pistols in the air, and life is good. We're really lucky. But you have to be able to identify what days what. Are we good today? And again, just you fly around the corner and anybody knows in the avalanche world that there's so much to be said just from perception. You can look at the mountains and what are the mountains telling you? Are the mountains shedding right now? Is it hot? Do they look really wind loaded? What's the wind been doing? What's the sun doing today? How warm is it? Holy mackerel, there's avalanches on every aspect, on every peak. Guess what we're going to ski today? We're going to ski low angle glaciers all day long. But some days you go out and there's not an avalanche in sight, and ski cuts aren't producing anything. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you there's nothing like making a ski cut across a 2,000-foot, 55-degree ramp and watching that entire glacier fill up with the Empire State Buildings down there tumbling to the bottom, and the cloud of smoke races up the other side, and the hair stands up on the back of your neck. And talk about adrenaline. It's just, oh my God, it's a display of Mother Nature like nobody else. But the other side of that is when there's no results, well, Alaska, that maritime snowpack, it comes off the Gulf of Alaska, that warm Japanese air, that current comes and hits our cold glaciers and it plasters our mountains. And I always say, whether you visit Points North or any heli ski operation in Alaska, when it's on and it's good, there is no place in the world better than riding a magic carpet in the Chugach Mountains of Alaska. Nowhere on the planet. I mean, Alaska, period, whether you're Tardrillas, you're in Haines and Juneau, you're in Cordova, you're in Valdez, there is no place like Alaska in that snowpack. There's nothing like it because you can ski the steepest possible things that you can imagine safely because that snowpack allows us to do so.
So you can do that safely, but like we said, there's accidents in the mountains, and unfortunately where you live, there was a huge accident recently and a terrible loss of life, and you probably knew some of the people, and it was awful, and you obviously aren't a judge and jury, and the most important thing about this whole thing is there is a tragic loss of life, but I'm sure you know more about this than me. What are the legal ramifications of something like this? Because I've been hearing stories of like these guides there could be criminal charges. And I don't know if that's true or not. But for you being in that whole world, is that fucking crazy?
It's really crazy, Mike. I'm too close to it. You know, I know the owners of Blackbird. I didn't know any of the guides on the trip. And again, my opinion is purely what it is and speculative. Sure. And I don't dare even cross that line.
Yeah.
But there's some obvious, there's two sides of this coin, right? Where Tahoe people, mountain people, go out when it's as nasty as it gets. Some of our close friends go out and ski tour in the nastiest of weather. It's what mountain folks do. Beach folks, when it's high surf, nobody's allowed in the water, and every red flag in the world is telling you can't go in the water. It's blackball. Lifeguards aren't going to rescue you. But those are the big waves, and that's when people are paddling out. Similar into the mountains, right? These women, from what I understand, and I don't know them, but these women in particular had a lot of experience ski touring in this area. Blackbird guides and the guides taking them had a lot of experience, right? I mean, experience is what it is. And they were all very familiar with the area and the ins and outs. And so I, too, am very, very interested to see what really comes about. I pray that those guys don't get criminal gross negligence, which is very, very likely. And I pray that we don't all of a sudden have new litigation in the forest for what we can and can't do when it snows because they're going to close the mountains. But we also have a lot of folks that come up from the city that think, oh, I can go out in the mountains and go ski touring, and they have no clue, no education, no training. Where it crosses this line is that when you hire a company for the safety aspect and the lifeguard, so to speak, to get you in and out safely, I think that it's going to be really interesting as to what comes about. Without speculating and even saying my opinion, you can probably read between the lines.
Sure.
But I mean, geez. And knowing what I said about the folks that live in the mountains, we go play in the mountains when it's really, really nasty. This storm in particular was forecasted for 2 weeks prior. Winds at the time on top of Squaw, which is about 8 to 10 miles south of where they were, winds were gusting at 11:30. They were gusting over 125 miles an hour. And so the idea of leaving a hut in 125 mile an hour winds, call it 70 and 80 if they were protected, wherever it was, you're not going to be able to see very well. It's going to be whiteout conditions. And I just think in time we're going to learn a lot more about what really transpired. And I hope for everybody's sake that it comes out with the best outcome for everybody involved. I mean, being ski guides and as an operator for a really long time, I feel for the operation and what they're doing. And yeah, part of me is like, man, that was a really, really bad call on their part. Like, what were they thinking? But the Libra in me, right, the other side of that is, well, fuck, man, we're mountain folks. Like, we go out in that kind of weather, and our best of friends go out in that kind of weather. And these guys were super trained and those girls had experience. And so you got to leave it up to the court. I have a feeling it's going to be a really bad outcome for everybody involved, but we'll just see where it goes.
Okay. And now we will go to some more fun, lighter stuff before we get into the last part of the podcast. But in thinking of, you've seen the best skiers and snowboarders in the world come to your place year in and year out. You've seen them with your own eyes. And while there's a lot of pros, there are different levels of pros. I'm sure there's some pros that go to Alaska and are scared and are timid at first. And then there's some that are frothing and they're like, I've been waiting my whole life for this. Who's the best skier and best snowboarder that you've seen?
For snowboarders, starting with the snowboarders, the snowboard crew that originally came to Alaska, the Mitch Toadler and the Florian Orley, the Mitch and Flo show, they showed up in Alaska and they were on the world tour, early days of the Freeride World Tour, sponsored snowboarders, and where they went and what they wanted to ski or ride, I should say, they set a new standard in Alaska for riding. And I mean, that's a big statement because, Hatchets were doing their thing and what they do was the best of the best. And then their time, and then you get Rippy, and then, of course, you have Terje, and you have Johan, and you've got Noah Slasnik, that whole crew that was Valdez and Jeremy Jones. I mean, those are the best of the best. And when Mitch and Flo showed up, they were as equal to what those guys were doing. But just knowing what I know and seeing, I almost feel like they were these crazy Euro riders. They were as good as those guys predating them. I can't say they were any better because that would take away what those other guys were doing. Those were the best of the best. And then you have to throw Seth Westcott in the mix. Seth, the Olympic gold medalist, two-time Olympic gold medalist, and what Seth was doing. Uli Kestenholtz, who we just lost recently in an avalanche. The Seth, the Uli, the Mitch, the Flo show, they were the best of the best snowboarders that I got to ride with and see. I mean, there was nobody better. There's others that have come through, but when I think of the four that stand out, the four that are pictures in my own living room, it's those guys. And then, of course, for skiers, I mean, we've had a lot, but I would have to say Kreitler was probably the best of the best. And flying around with Kent, who was a close friend of mine and a close friend of mine in Squaw before we even started Points North. I have to throw Adam Hostetter in there too with the snowboard stuff, but he was more of a racer style than the big mountain guy.
But just solid foundation and could ride everything super fast.
Yeah, and Haas was part of Red Eye Productions, and Red Eye created my first logo, the N with the globe and all of the above. They were here in Tahoe, and then Hostetter was part of the TGR crew. He had his big, huge RV that we put Points North on the back of it, and he was a Gold Pass member for a little while. But Kreitler is the skier riding around in a helicopter with Kent, who'd already had 3, 4, 5 years of heli experience in Alaska. That was the next step of like what Kent, when we put Kent on top of Sphinx, and he made 5 turns down the Sphinx, this 1,800 foot, 55 degree sustained ramp. It was mind-boggling. It was as good as watching Nobis and and Shane all of a sudden get themselves on a pair of fat skis and straight line huge peaks. That was Kent. There was nobody better. And then having the opportunities to do Warren Miller segments. The Warren Miller segment that stands out was Kent, Micah Black, and myself. And we get to ski every last aspect of Sphinx 10 ways to Sunday, and then put our packs down at the bottom and bring Keoki and Tom Day and ski Sphinx proper with them. It was something else. And then Mike and I got to introduce...
Yeah. What's the Micah
Mike and
Black
I introduced the whole
story?
long line stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What's the Micah Black long line story?
So Micah and I had this idea with one of our early pilots, Ron Chaplin. You know, everybody's towing in, and the towing is the danger element. Well, what about just, you know, I keep seeing these pilots sling fuel to our fuel cache. You know, they're taking firefighters into, you know, high-risk situations, dope on a rope, so to speak. It's called short haul. And then the military does it for insertion. And I'm thinking to myself, man, what a cool way to be able to rescue someone if they fall into a hole, rather than building an entire system to drag someone up and out of the hole, which takes time, digging a trench, digging an anchor, etc., wrapping down and assessing your victim, stabilizing them, then hauling them out. Why don't we just hook up the cable? We all ski in harnesses. You can dump me in the hole. Hi, I'm your guide. How are you? You're stabilized. Let's pull you out. You know, you whistle and the helicopter pulls you out, and it's much quicker. Then I thought, man, we could avalanche control. I could be on this big cable, and instead of putting myself on a rope, I can go to the mountains and fly to every damn peak and go make ski cuts all over the place and set off huge avalanches. And oh my God, I can stomp on huge cornices and nothing's going to happen, and watch it go out from underneath me and load the slope. And it was like,
this is your next genius idea.
This is like, I'm going to do this. Holy cow. I want to go to that peak right there because there's nowhere I can land, but I can get slung over to that peak. And so we trained it down in Chico, California on a long line. I'll never forget Captain Ron dunking all of us in the Lake Orville and dragging us around on this long line. And that experience in itself, you know, being 600-800 feet, 1,000 feet off the ground under a helicopter flying around with your buddies. Are you kidding me? Pinch me. This is fucking ridiculous. Well, I invite Mike up because I'm like, we got to do a story. We can film this. TGR needs to film this. This is insane. So Mike and I now, we train at the Orca Cannery with our skis on, and we're out over the bay, you know, 600-800, 1,000 feet off the deck with Captain Ron flying us around, and go faster because the G-forces all of a sudden have us like sideways, horizontal to the aircraft, and we were on like the best go-kart ride in the world, right? Well, okay, let's take it to the mountains. And so you get out there, now we don't have to tow in, and helicopter just sort of drops you off. You unclip from your D-ring and off you go. You're ready to go. It's that simple. There's no unloading the aircraft. There's no dealing with baskets. Skis are already on your feet. And Ron dropped me over on this run we call Gambler Spine, which was like a 3,000-foot, 55-plus over huge exposure ski line that I've been dreaming about for the last 4 or 5 years in business. Nobody'd ever skied it for sure. And then he dropped me there, and he took Micah down the ridge. Oh, I don't know, maybe 600-800 feet down the ridge. And so Mike and I are standing up there. But I remember flying over, just Mike and I laughing, like, are you kidding me? What would our moms think of this? And you know, it was something else to where, I mean, we made it a game. Like, Micah, stick your arm out. And I wouldn't put my arm out, and the wind would catch his arm, and we'd start spinning, and he'd put his arm back to his side, and I'd put my arm out, and then we'd start spinning the other direction. And their skis are pinned in like this continued back scratcher position because you couldn't bring your feet forward because of the wind. And it just, oh my goodness, like mind-blowing experience. What a cool opportunity. I'm so grateful to have that opportunity. Well, holy mackerel, we're going to sell this to guests. What an opportunity. The FAA got wind of what we were doing, and that didn't last very long. The pilot got a slap on the wrist, and they said, hey, we understand why you're doing this. And because I played the big, it's a safety thing. It's all about safety. We can ski cut, we can create avalanches safely, and we can rescue people safely. And the military does this, the firefighters. And they said, yeah, but you guys can have this in your bag of tricks, but you can't do it commercially, and you can't sell it to passengers. And so that was sort of the end of the long lining in Alaska, but it made a clip in one of the TGR films, I forget which, and then it made the cover of the National Geographic Explorer magazine, and it was elsewhere. And what a cool experience with my bro, Micah.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, that is our podcast, but now I end every podcast with something that I call Inappropriate Questions.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I had a few people lined up, and pretty much what I do is I get somebody that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. But I went to a few different people. One was Matt Reardon, and he made it seem like he was going to be good for Inappropriate Questions, and he had a great story. He really loves you. He went to Kirkwood with you, and he skied with you, and then you guys went to a hockey game. You actually played in the game. You beat the shit out of somebody. You got kicked out of the game, and he had beers with you in the crowd, and he has a man crush on you, I think, forever because of that. And this is the guy that a lot of other men have man crushes on because he's like a rock star in his own world. But he loves you and thinks you're so rad, but he wasn't the right one for Inappropriate Questions. Then I went to another one of your good friends that was recommended to me by your wife, but he said he was working 18-hour days and couldn't get this done, but he didn't let me know until a couple hours ago that he couldn't get it done. So I came up with 3 Inappropriate Questions myself, and I'm going to start with question number 1 right now. It's an easy one for the Powell movement. Have you ever had an unplanned Powell movement while skiing?
An unplanned bowel movement? No, maybe a bowel movement.
Exactly.
We won't talk about that.
Okay, but it's happened. All right, okay, that's question number 1.
That was a famous Ole chairlift, and my wife said, "Don't ask about that question. I know it's going to get asked."
Okay, so we don't have to do it, but you've had that.
Yep, that was a famous Ole chair line. The long story short is a long KT line. Don't drink coffee and yogurt at the same time, and don't get stuck on a chair that breaks for a really long time. And one thing leads to the next.
Oh, man. Well, dropping next, I guess, on that one. So that is that question. But we'll go to question number 2. And have you ever lost a hockey fight?
Oh, yeah. I got teeth knocked out. I mean, my hockey card says it all. I got black eyes and stitches and missing teeth for sure. I don't proclaim to be any tough guy by any means, but I could hold my own. But trying to make it up into the ranks and prove your stuff, for whatever reason, I always got the guy that was 6'5" and 250 pounds, and my playing weight was 225. I'm 6'3", 225, and yeah, I definitely got pounded for sure.
All right, and your final inappropriate question, this one came from the research. What is the table of death?
Oh, the table of death is like everybody that's been to P&H that gets invited into the kitchen. There's a beautiful, what do they call it? The prep table. It's where all the food gets prepped, but it's this stainless steel table. The edges are extremely sharp, so you don't want to grab a hold of it. But you get 2 people up on that table, and you're not allowed to go to your knees, and you can't use your feet. And you got to get that person off the table, and he who goes off the table wins. But we've had some unbelievable table of death moments where we've had 150 people in the kitchen, literally half the town, all of our staff, all of our guests cheering as loud as they can go. And one that stands out in my mind in particular was a fellow by the name of Sean. I can't remember his last name, and Jason Bielik, who's one of our longtime guides, original chef. And Sean was an MMA fighter, and we had like the announcer, just like you'd think of Michael Buffer coming in, and inbound, we have Jason Bielik. And it was a fight of all fights, but it was the table of death in the kitchen at P&H. And of course, there's a few soda pops that go down before that happens, and the crowd goes crazy. And the table of death is something that everybody inspired not to be part of, but when you got called, you couldn't turn it down. And yeah, that's the table of death. That's funny you know about that.
All right. So that is Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast. And while I have a lot of mountain people on the podcast, you're a man of the mountains, like a giant bred to be in the biggest mountains of the world. And then you left that to follow your passion and dreams in hockey. But while you never went like full on pro in sports, I mean, I guess you're pro, you're getting paid to play, but you're not like an NHL guy. You do go pro in business. And that's funny because being an entrepreneur is probably the last thing on your radar when you were in your younger days, but you were destined to have a business that allowed your leadership skills and work ethic and all that kind of shit to take over. And then you have your wife, which you said the yin to your yang. She's able to run the business and make that thing work. And that's how you guys are able to be super successful. And it's something to be super proud of. Another thing that's something to be super proud of is not going bankrupt like a lot of the other people and being able to keep that reputation. That sounds like it's very, very important to you, because if I owed a shitload of money, I might have gone bankrupt, but that's me and I'm not you. And I thank you for telling your story, and I thank you for your time.
Mike, I thank you so much, and I really appreciate your time, and thanks for even thinking of me, and I hope viewers and listeners enjoy this podcast. Thanks so much.
So that was time with Kevin Quinn, and what a cool backstory he has. I mean, being a pro hockey player and a pro skier, that only happens when you were born with the natural talent and the drive to be the best. And while Kevin didn't make it all the way to the NHL level, he played pro hockey. I'm willing to bet that he's heli skied more than any NHL hockey player in history. And while that's an educated guess, Kevin's life in the mountains doesn't happen if he focuses on team sports. And if Kevin wasn't part of the industry, would anyone be skiing out of Cordova? Who knows? But thanks to Kevin, we are. That's the podcast. At this point, I want to thank you for listening. I want to ask you to review me wherever you listen. And please, please, please support my incredible sponsors who make this podcast happen. They are Elan Skis, B.A.S.E Brewing, Outdoor Research, and Insta360 action cameras. Have a great week, everyone.